Gray hair. You stay out of this conversation.
All right. So just welcome real quick. This is a joint meeting of the Higganum Economic Development Commission and the Higganum Vision Group. It's an opportunity to listen to Andy Becker present on the Rossi property, and he's done this already to P&Z and to the EDC.
Yes, it did.
And so this is an opportunity. We have a lot of merchants here and other individuals from town. The primary audience was to get the merchants that are going to be certainly directly affected by this, and so give them a chance to listen to with this presentation. So.
Okay, thank you very much. I know a lot of you from the old days. Andy Becker is my name. I lived in town for 15 years. I had an office across the street in that brick building for a number of years, and where the pharmacy is, right next door here, I had a law office in there for another 4 or 5 years. So I got a lot of history with the town and with this site. The site, and you know the site across the street, is owned by the Rossi brothers. They've had visions of developing it for many, many years. At one time, the CVS pharmacy people had an option to buy the property and to put a pharmacy. It would have been in here, and that never went anywhere. And finally, it came to the point where they decided they wanted to develop it themselves. So they retained the services of Jeff Bianco, who's with a firm called Northeast Collaborative Architects up in Middletown on College Street, right next to Tuscany Grill. And I met with Jeff a number of times, as did Rossi's, kind of to think about the site and what could be done there. And these, what I'm going to show you, are elevations and concept plans. They aren't at the point where we would make an application yet to P&Z, but we're sort of heading in this direction. So this is an as-is plan. Saybrook Road, Route 154, Depot Road, the town garage, the Rossi property, the Higganum Elementary School. My kids both graduated from here. Then they went on to Xavier, where they were both thrown out. They got through here all right. So the brick office building in the front, the large pallet shop that's rented by the town, the garage that you see as you go by on the road, and in the back were these lumber drying kilns that several years ago we demoed. They hadn't been used for many years, and I thought they were a safety hazard, and I took them down. This is kind of interesting, and I'm going to bring it a little closer. There used to be, in here somewhere, a picture of this, but this is what the property used to look like when there were mill buildings on it. It's reversed from this, so this is Depot Road, and right here is Saybrook Road 154 coming across the front. And you can see the property had a whole bunch of these old 3-story, probably wooden mill buildings on it at one time. And I remember in here on a wall this picture, but I don't see it now.
It's actually on the Library of Congress website.
Perhaps that. Yeah, and I've seen maps of the town where this is also. It's like an 1870s sort of map. So when I talked to Jeff, and we talked about design, I said, look, there used to be a 3-story mill sort of building there. Can you design me something that evokes that same memory? So when you look at what we're going to do now, you'll kind of picture those in your mind, including, Patrick, maybe you can tell me, what's the word for these things up on top?
Just little cupolas or vents.
Yeah, there's a word, though, and I've lost the word. But anyway, even to the extent of, it's another word.
Isn't it monitor?
Monitor.
Monitor, that's right, monitor. Who said that? Excellent. So even to the extent of having the monitors on the other building. So that's kind of our starting point of where we are today. This is the JC Products property over here. Everybody remembers Chucky Hellenic. And the entire site is approximately 5 acres. There's a little stream back here. Over here is this major stream that crosses and goes around there and then heads down to the river. This is the bridge here that they're talking about taking out sometime in the future. I think Liz Glidden told me next year sometime, and replacing it. So I don't know what that'll be. So that's kind of an as-is thing. I'm going to put that away. Okay, after a number of design sessions and a lot of talking, we came up with this as a site plan, a concept plan. Well, let me walk you through this. same orientation, Route 154, Depot Road, the town garage, the elementary school. In this plan, the only building that remains is what's left of the garage. If you can picture the garage as you drive by, you'll see it with two large overhead doors. It's amazing what Bianco did with it. It doesn't look like that garage anymore, but that's the only remaining building. In this plan, everything else comes down, totally is demoed. And the truth be known, there isn't much there of much value. I mean, I've known those buildings for a long, long time, and they're kind of at the end of their useful life. It looks like hell, and it wouldn't be such a bad thing if they came down ultimately. So the concept is, the initial concept, this would be a single building which would have retail on the lower floor and offices on the upper floor. I'm going to show you a picture of what that looked like. And this would be a commercial building of some sort, whether it be a restaurant or what it would be, we're not sure, single-story building. And these buildings here would be residential buildings. As designed, they would have 85 apartment units in them now. We haven't really figured out whether they're ones and twos, but there'd be some mix. But there's, the head count is sort of 85 now. The rest of this is parking. At one time, we had thought we were going to put a covered parking deck with some tenant amenities on the top deck, you know, like an outdoor kitchen and a fire pit and everything. That idea has kind of fallen to the wayside, and it would probably just be a continuation of this parking. Now, at an earlier meeting, we met with Liz Bazazzi at one time. This is the town green here, and the
gazebo.
Yeah, the gazebo right here. And Liz expressed an interest in having a building here that would front the green. She said that in the old times, the greens typically were lined with buildings, and she wanted to see a building there. And in another draft, which I don't have with me, Jeff Bianco went back. I'm just going to show you this quickly. And he designed a building that would be essentially in that space, opposite the gazebo, along there. This is if you can picture the site, it falls away fairly steeply to about here, and then gradually to the rear. So this is a building which would probably have 2 stories visible from the road and a lower story access from the back. And the design, I don't have a design, but it would be something similar to the others. So I'm just going to take that out of the way for the time being, but as you look at this, think another building up in here. Now these are some of the drawings that show you what the proposed look would be. So this is a drawing which looks straight down that existing driveway. There's a gate here now. If you stood kind of in the middle of Saybrook Road with the pharmacy behind you, this is how that garage has been rebuilt and reconstructed in Jeff's imagination. The overhead doors come out, there's a combination of doors and windows, there's some sort of canopy thing. So that would be the garage. The parking, as we talked about, would extend back on this side. There's the garage there, back on that side of the garage. And as you look at this plan, behind, I'm just going to stand this up a bit more here. Behind the garage, we're looking at this building, along in here, and here's the mill buildings with the monitors on top. Thank you for reminding me that word. And again, if we look to this way, we're looking at this building, which would have retail space on the ground floor, an entrance foyer of some sort here, and office space on the second floor. And behind that, we're peeking at these buildings sort of showing up in the rear there. So that's the concept of what they would look like. And location-wise, the garage is the anchor. This new building, the brick building, if you remember, was quite a bit forward of that. Very close to the road, and really not a good spot. And there's a driveway right here now, in addition to this driveway. And the concept was give up that driveway, have this be the main entrance for the commercial spot, and then I'll show you another plan, have this be the entrance for the residential piece of it. So you come to this light and you make a left turn and you come this way. So I'll go back through these, but I wanted to kind of give you an overview. So now we're looking down into the site from 154. Okay, next view. Again, this is our garage. So we're standing here in front of the garage to our left, and we're looking across this green area. This is this corner here. And we're looking at two of these buildings. And this structure here is the back side of that building. So you've got an open green in here with something in the middle, whether it's a gazebo or whether it's a fountain or something like that. This is intended to be the handicap parking here close to the buildings with the other commercial parking along in there. And again, you get a sense of what the buildings would look like. Okay, I'll come back to these, but I just wanted to walk you through the whole thing. Okay, now this is a view from Depot Road down this driveway. So if you're sitting up here on Phil Goff's tailgate, you'd be looking right down here into this sort of driveway to the right. And what you're seeing here is this piece of the two buildings, and then the driveway, and then part of what would be here, and then the end of this building, right like that. And we're looking up the hill now towards the elementary school, and the town garage is right behind us. You're going to sort of get a sense of how it lays out. This would all be parking down along here. There would be some parking in here, and there is parking along the street. You can't quite see it on here, but it's designed to have parking, but it would be exit parking. In other words, it's not on that side of the street, so you could park facing that way, but nothing on that side. And the concept is that this would sort of be visitor parking for the units here. And the last picture is from right in the intersection, maybe over by Citizens Bank, looking into the property this way. So we're standing, maybe in the middle of the intersection. This is the wall for that stream that goes through, and we're looking between the two buildings into the intersection. There's intended to be either a walk or a stairway there. The thought is that a crosswalk will come over here, and the walk will permit you to walk either way and to get down into the project. And similarly for the residents to pick up the sidewalks and walk back off and to get to the village. So looking in there, this is this end of this building, retail on the ground floor, and then offices on the upper floor. And this building here, we're looking at this side of this building. This is this little tower structure that sort of sticks out and runs along Depot Road. So that's kind of what we plan to do with the property. It would be, this building would be approximately 16,000 square feet. This building would be about 7,500, maybe 2,500 on 3 floors. And the garage is another 5,000 square feet, if it doesn't fall down between now and then. So that would be, that would be the building that we would save. That's a brick structure, so it's worth saving. The others are a combination of metal and wood, and I have no great pride in the other buildings. But that garage, according to Jeff's concept, could improve nicely. So I'd be happy to answer questions or take this any direction you guys want.
Open the floor.
Dave?
So question. How do we flush the toilets?
It's a good question. I need town approval to do this, obviously, and I need 3 levels of state approval. And the first is sewer. At one time, I read the Higganum Bulletin, and Paul had $7.2 million in, and the sewer was coming down. I've since met with him, and now I understand that that's simply not the case. And I've read the sewer studies, and it's tough. You got to come all the way down, and whether you come down Route 154, which is very expensive, or you come down the railroad tracks, which is a little less expensive, you're not sewering anybody all the way. I mean, there can't be 10 houses that you would pick up on the way down. So now you get to Higganum Center down by the landing here, and you could connect Higganum Center up to that, but it's really expensive if the town were to do it. I've looked into doing it, and the jury is not in yet on it, but it appears as though it will be very expensive, perhaps prohibitive to the project, for me to put a black box there and then run a pipe all the way down to the river and discharge in the river. It seems problematic whether DEP will let me, but assuming that they will, you can't discharge into these local streams. These streams are Class A streams, and the quality of effluent that comes out of these black box sewer system is not suitable for that. So you have to run to the river, and I've talked to a bunch of different engineers, Gail, and some people say you can do it, and some people say you can't do it technically. But the estimates that I've been getting in, I'd have to have 385 units on the property to pay for it, which isn't going to happen. It doesn't take it, it won't, you know, you can't fit it, it would be ugly as hell, so I don't want to do it. So now what I've started to look at is on-site septic. But let me back up a little bit. The original plan with Paul was brilliant. I was going to put in a modular black box, and I was going to sewer my project, and I was going to run a pipe all the way down the road to the river. And if my project required a 6-inch pipe, and somebody told me to sewer the whole village, I mean, the idea was the bowl, you know, up to Marge DeBold's house, and up to Dunkin' Donuts, and up to the reservoir. Just that bowl would take a 12-inch pipe. Well, the cost of pipe is nothing. The cost is digging a ditch. So there I'd be, and instead of my 6-inch pipe, I'd work something out with the town, and I'd put an 8-inch pipe in, and I'd be all set. And the box would be modular, so I'd have enough capacity to sewer my units. And if the town ever decided they wanted to sewer the village, we'd add on a module, whatever that means. Well, it now appears that it's not possible financially. I'm not at the bottom line on that, but I'm heading in a different direction. And the different direction is that apparently the technology exists to put what I'll call a mini black box, a black box that won't produce an effluent of a quality sufficient to put in the river, but it removes the nitrogen, which apparently is a big problem with waste. And then with the effluent removed by this black box, you would be able to create a large septic system on the property. And the original people I've talked to have said there's more than sufficient land here under the parking lot where you would have your septic system, and I'd be happy. So if I could do that, I could develop my property, I could sewer my property, and I'd be done. But I'd have no solution for the village as a whole. So we've gone a couple of different directions on this, but that's kind of where we end up right now. I mean, if all of a sudden the numbers come in that make sewering to the river possible, I would prefer to do that. But I don't think it's going to happen, to tell you the truth. So that's kind of the answer. So that's one thing I have to do with the state, is solve this sewer thing. And it takes state approval as well as town approval to design and build an on-site septic. The second thing I've got to do is I've got to get water. We've got to be able to drink here. Well, there have been other problems in Higganum Center. For a long time, there was some plume, was something bad that came through, and there were all these filters. Anybody remember the filters on all the buildings? Well, that appears to have passed. But the water people I've talked to have said, look, you're that close to the Connecticut River, you drill down 800 feet, you'll find good water of sufficient quantity. So I haven't spent too much more time on that because that makes sense to me. The river is 2,000 feet that way. It's generally a sandy soil, so I think I'll be able to get that part of it. Sewer, water, and the other part of it is the state traffic people. I've got to get approval from somebody in the state of Connecticut. This is an existing curb cut, but basically for the traffic flows within the property. And my thought was, as I said, this existing turn would be into the commercial sort of space. You'd come through that light, make that turn, and you'd be in the retail sort of space. But somebody up in the state is going to have to look at that. I'm going to need a traffic engineer, and eventually I'm hopeful that it would come out. So those are my three sort of out-of-town approvals. In town, obviously, I need planning and zoning and whatever else I need. There aren't any wetlands on the site, except that right here, the site touches a stream, and there is another stream back here somewhere. So I'd be before the Wetlands Commission as well as before the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that's kind of my approvals map as I think about the property. The apartments, as we conceive them, would be market rent apartments. We aren't thinking about any sort of HUD or Section 8 or any sort of specialized rentals. I believe that there are people in town, and I've read hundreds of articles recently saying, you know, the young couples that have been foreclosed out, they aren't going to buy a house, they're going to rent. And the older people who are going to retire and have friends in town, they're going to rent. They're going to sell their house and they're going to rent. So, and young couples that are just starting out and they aren't sure where they're going to be job-wise, they aren't going to buy, they're going to rent. So there appear to be a number of studies supporting the need for market rate housing. It's not a huge project. I mean, 85 units, if it's, you know, 2 bedrooms, if they all were 2 bedrooms, which they probably won't be, you know, it's 160, it's 170 people living there. So it's not like you were building one of those Achenbach projects out in Westlake, but it would be a significant presence in Higganum Center. I mean, these are people who would hopefully park their car at the end of the day, walk across the street, buy a bottle of wine, buy a baguette, and some cheese and go home. You know, I mean, who knows what they'll do. Yes, Kip.
We got the Frenchman loading up.
Getting back to sewers. So I think it would be wonderful for your project if you could, in fact, handle all of that on your own site and not have to worry about the rest of Higganum Center. However, if I'm a young couple and I'm trying to make a decision where to move, I would like to, and I'm going to live near a quaint little center, I would like to at least have some amenities in the center. And we can't have more businesses in the center without the ability to flush.
Yep.
So, my question is that when you have your conversations with the DEP and with the state, has there been any discussion about, and I know that there's interest in the state, and I know that there's money in the state level to facilitate these kind of projects. And it seems that when there is a property owner who's willing to develop in this way, that it would incentivize the town as well to work with you to figure out a way to not only keep your rents at market value, but maybe enhance them somewhat by providing you with a center that will attract people to come. Not just that you build lovely new housing, but that they have a reason to want to be in this very lovely center, which is lovely, but could use a little jump start on the ability to have more businesses.
I agree with you. I mean,
So
that's what makes this marketable, is it's not a Chester, but it's maybe an almost Chester. And you have whatever collection of shops can sustain themselves off of existing traffic and my contribution.
Absolutely. So I guess my question is, how does the town facilitate? How do we ask all the right questions to begin the conversation of how we handle sewage more collectively for the town center as well as for your project?
I've had a number of discussions with Paul and with Mike Fortuna, and the town has spent a lot of money and done a lot of sewer studies and has some numbers for what it would take to bring it down. And it's just a substantial amount of money, and there doesn't appear to be enough fund or grant money. I mean, if there was sewer here, I've got no problem. I hook up, we turn a switch, and I'm done. I don't have to worry about it. But as I say, I don't know what the real answer is yet. But in my last discussions with Paul, it didn't seem as though it was possible. I mean, one of the problems is, I mean, I lived in Higganum for 15 years. And I know some of you people, and I know the others who aren't here. Ultimately, if you're going to bond $7 million for a sewer project, even if you could get a couple of $1 million from somebody, you need $5 million. And as a guy who lives up on Thayer Road, who has no sewer, gonna vote so that you can flush your toilets or I can flush my toilets. I don't know what they're gonna do. The argument is that if you do that, then there'll be more development in Higganum Center, and they'll pay more taxes, and your taxes, you know, on Picorni Road will be less. I understand the argument logically. I just don't know that you could sell it in town. You know, it's a tough sell. Yes, Mark?
Something probably a little more mundane, but in your marketing, when you're marketing these beautiful apartments and they look over the town garage, have you ever thought of talking to the town about improving the aesthetics of that property?
Yeah, I've talked to them about that. There's a long fence along here, and I've been given to understand that I would have permission to plant a series of arborvitae along there, which would give me some shielding. But I've also been through about 15 runs at moving the town garage to 15 or 20 different places, none of which have ever come to pass, but everybody feels it doesn't belong here. It isn't big enough, they have to move it. So I'm hopeful that at some time they would move it. I don't know where. Sometimes they talk about the state garage, and I remember all the other sites where they were looking at, and I think they continue to look. So the only thing I can do is apologize to my people for the town garage, plant some trees and hope they spring up quickly, and hope that the neighbors who are next to the new town garage site won't show up and beat them up over it. But you know, how many town garage sites have you seen in the time you've been in town?
Very many.
Yeah.
Quite a few.
Yeah.
And that goes back quite a few years.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it does, but that's my answer to the town garage. I'll do what I can to screen it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't see it moving anytime
No,
soon.
I
So.
don't either. Well, this
What can
isn't
you
going to
do
be
to
up
make
a
it
week from next
work
Wednesday
out?
either,
Oh,
but,
okay.
you know, if this was 2 or 3 years out by the time you get done with all the approvals, that's enough time to find another site and possibly move. So what I hope to do is screen it while it's there and believe that ultimately it'll move for reasons unrelated to my project, because you need more land and it needs to be in another place. I've had a number of discussions with first select people of town about the town buying this site from me and using it as a town garage or municipal site or everything else. And the ultimate word on that was, we don't want to take a valuable property off the tax rolls in Higganum Center. We'd rather see that used for something commercial or retail or residential. We don't want to have it. And for all the reasons this was a bad site for the town garage, this is an equally bad site. We need it somewhere else. And I've heard the arguments about it should be centered in the town. And you know, I lived in town for 15 years or so. So that's my answer. I hope it isn't there at some time in the future. Phil does a decent job with it. I mean, it's not a pigsty over there. I think he does a good job. It's not the most attractive thing. In terms of design, the buildings along that side I've designed with high windows. I can't find the picture, so you can't look at it.
It's down here, Andy.
Is it? Oh, okay, thank you. Well, yeah, this series of windows, which would other look at it, are frosted in the lower and clear on the upper. But from here and here, you would look out on it. So I can't do anything with it. there was a guy by the name of Joe Ming who had an option on the property for a while and had some development ideas. And his idea was that I'm not going to build it until you move the town garage, and then I want to buy that property and put more of it over there. I'm a lot more simplistic than that. I know that my demand that you move the town garage isn't going to move anybody, and if I were able to develop this site successfully, I'd be very happy and not look to expand it elsewhere. So, kind of my answer to that question.
Andy, what is your time frame on this?
I think between the town and the state, I've got 2 years in approvals. Something like that. I think it would take that long between the sewer and the water and the traffic. I think the town would be the quicker one, and I've had a number of conversations with Liz Glidden, and I've been before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I believe they would be inclined to give me an approval for the site subject to state traffic, subject to sewer approval, subject to water approval. I got to start somewhere. I can't go to the state if I don't have anything here. So that seemed to be a logical starting point. And in terms of sequencing, there's enough septic capacity on the site now, it's a 5-acre site, where if I could put up this building or this building, I could temporarily put a septic in for it and then build my whole thing later. So I don't know what the sequence would be, but ultimately, I'm on my own. I have to dispose of all the waste produced on the property myself, and I've got to come up with a plan that's technically feasible and financially feasible. This gentleman.
Yes, 2 questions. Is this self-financed, number 1, or not? And number 2, there was pollution on the property, and is that being remediated, or is that going to be remediated as part of this project?
Yeah, it would be financed by a bank. I mean, ultimately, a bank would have to loan us funds in order to build this. This is an expensive project. And, we wouldn't finance it ourselves. In terms of the remediation, I have had a number of sessions with environmental people over the years trying to pin down what was there and what isn't there. And I'm going to drill a few more holes. But it's interesting. One of the techniques to remediate, I mean, this is a site that's been used since the 1850s. I doubt there's a single piece of original soil anywhere on that site. I think any place you dig, you're going to run into coal, and you run into cinders, and you're going to run into fill material. At one time, you remember those industrial buildings, there was a flume that ran entirely through the property and discharged in the back. And those old mills were water-powered mills. There was no electricity, there was no gas or anything. So there would have been, you've seen on the movies, these great big belts that sort of slap around and wheels that turn. So, and that flume was filled up with something. So, I don't know, I mean, in the time that the Rossis have used it, nothing has happened on the property. We didn't dip lumber in creosote, and there was no chemical treatment. But in the past, you know, God only knows what went on there. I'm told, in fact, I met with Fuss and O'Neill today, who are some premier environmental people up in Manchester. And they told me this buzzword, which I said I'm going to have tattooed on my forehead. And the buzzword is development is the best remediation. And the idea is that if you took this property and capped it with 3 or 4 feet of soil, you could virtually leave everything that's there and not worry about it at all. Now, that's not to say that if there was a tank, you wouldn't remove the tank. And that's not to say if there was an area of contaminated soil from a previous tank, you wouldn't remove that. But the whole concept of it being an old industrial site that was used by the cutaway harrow people to make harrows and drop forges and everything else, the sort of industrial history of the site would be capped over. The more immediate industrial pollution type issues, if found, would be removed. Like I have a couple of gas tanks in here now, 1 diesel and 1 gas tank. Those would be removed. And over the years, we've removed a whole series, that's better off the other one, but we've removed a whole series of other tanks on it also. So bottom line is, I don't know of any overwhelming, compelling environmental problem with the property that couldn't be remediated or couldn't be, whether by removal or by encapsulation. And I've taken some good advice on that because it's a very important question. So that's kind of my thinking on that. As part of this business of on-site septic, Gail, because none of the soil is original soil, and it's cinders, and it's, you know, it's bits and pieces of stuff, for on-site septic, you would probably move new soil onto the property. If you remember the property, it slants here, and then there's a long gradual slope to the rear. So you could easily put 3 or 4 feet of soil back there, whatever's needed, and solve an environmental problem if there was one, and create a place for your on-site septic and your stormwater kind of all at the same time. And then you'd know what the soil was. I've done test pits on this over the years, and there's just a mixed bag of things. Any place you dig, there's something else. You dig here, you get pieces of metal. You dig here, there's some coal. And there's nothing terrible. It's not like you dug down and you found buried drums of terrible, you know, chemicals. But, you know, you saw what the site looked like in the old days, and it's been an industrial site. So that's what I hope the answer to that is.
Can you, I know you do, have some kind of estimate what this whole project will cost?
I don't really yet. I don't really yet.
Short of the septic system, the buildings and the like, or?
Well, let's think about this together. There are 85 apartments at, let's just say, 1,000 square feet each, so that's 85,000 square feet. And there's a 16,000 square foot front building, so 100,000 square feet, and a 75 more, so 110, 115,000 square feet of buildings. What would I use? 150 a foot, 200 a foot?
It's edging up beyond that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I used 150 foot, it would be a square foot, $20 million, rough number. $15 million. Now, that's without a sewer plant or anything else.
Jack wants to finance.
Excellent plan.
Thanks, Mark, I appreciate it.
So, I mean, it's a substantial amount of money. It wouldn't necessarily build all in 1 year. The buildings are set up so you could build some commercial first and a piece of residential next and the next piece next. And this, for example, these could be done in that next, and this could be done in that next. So you could phase it.
You're definitely thinking as rentals, not as condos or anything.
Absolutely, yep. We're thinking about rentals. I've been influenced by all these reports saying that people want to rent units. Now, that's not to say if I get into it and I found they were saleable as condos, I wouldn't do it. But my present thinking, and that of the Rossis, is rental units. As I mentioned, Higganum regulates residential by units. So the 85 units is a number I'm throwing around. Other towns regulate it by bedrooms. So 85 two-bedroom units would be 170. But I don't think they would all be 2 bedrooms. I'd have to have some ones and maybe some studios. So, well, there still might be 85 apartments. Some of them would be smaller. Yes, sir.
2 questions. Are you considering parking along Saybrook Road as well? And that other building that you're talking about at the head of that parking lot, is that more of the same kind of brick facade?
It would look the same as this other front building.
Okay.
It would have a similar sort of appearance. And no, not along Saybrook Road. Although it's interesting, I received an email from Liz Glidden
Yeah, I got that too.
with a
That's why I brought it
plan
up.
to put some parking spots on this side.
Right.
And I responded to her, Liz, we would have no objection to that, but if by the time I got to the state and the state traffic control regulation, somebody said you need to create a turn lane to get in here, I just didn't want to be backed in a position where it couldn't be expanded that way. But along here, that Saybrook Road is not a good place to park, in my opinion. You guys live here, but people come whizzing down the hill that way and
Well,
whizzing down the hill
that's
this
the
way.
whole idea with putting the parking spaces in, is
It would
actually
slow 'em
to
down?
constrain them and
Yeah.
slow them down, right?
Well, that was the idea
So-
over here, and I think it worked pretty well, which
Right.
it did over here on 81.
Right, and I think it could work there too. And the other reason I bring it up is, I mean, you've got two commercial buildings, and if you can get traffic to just pull off to
Yep.
go to those two buildings, then they're up on street level and they're kind of mixed in with the rest of the town too, as opposed to going to a back parking lot.
I would have no objection to that, I just have a sense the state wouldn't permit it. Under town zoning, you can't park in front of these buildings now, under the zoning in this district. If you think of my brick building, I've got the parking right in the front there, that's not permitted any longer. So these are designed so that the access would be from the rear, and the parking would all be in the rear. We did put, as I mentioned, that's a strip of parking, and that's a strip of parking on Depot Road, but the traffic issues are different.
And if
Sure.
I could jump in, I'm very sympathetic with that. DOT does have something called the CSS, or Context Sensitive Solutions thing, which would include not only on-street parking, but lowering the posted speed. Right now, the posted speed going through the center of town is 35 miles an hour, which is 15 miles an hour faster than Chester. It's faster than Essex. It's something that, according to the CSS program, one should be able to do, and that would help your project. It's in your and our enlightened self-interest
I want
to
people to
do
slow
that.
down. Plus, I think that's 15 miles an hour slower than people go, by the way.
Absolutely.
I think people come through that place at
People come
50
through
miles
there
an
at
hour.
55.
Yeah.
It's awful.
The other day when we had the townwide tag sale, cars were parked on both sides of that road and traffic was moving at 15, 20 miles an hour. It was great. It's the best I've seen it down there.
You didn't hear most of the comments I got from people coming into my store about it.
That's just because they're not
Drivers
used
had a
to
different
it.
opinion.
Once you get them used to it,
Yeah.
then it's different.
I have no objection and would welcome parking if I could have it on this road.
It would
It
help.
can only, that's right, it can only help me.
It can only happen.
Yeah, I have no sensitivity to that at all, and it would help the village. It would choke things down a little bit, people would slow and make their turn, whatever they did. Liz Glidden, the town planner, originally these buildings were tight together. And she said, look, you've got to open this up so that from this side, people can see in, can see what's going on in there. And that's kind of how this resulted. And it's at an angle, but this is a substantial gap where you'd be able to see and come through. And I thought that was a good suggestion, and we did that. And all of these walkways, and this would be a grassed area in here, so you can get into the site. There's a crosswalk there, but there is none here. So somehow, when we get this done, we've got to figure out how people can flow both ways there. And I don't know what the answer is at this point.
The final tally appears to me that you would have 3 commercial buildings, and then along Depot Road and in the back, that would be all residential.
That's right. 1, 2, 3, and then residential and residential. This is a depiction of a black box, some kind of sewer plant. And originally, we were showing a detention pond of some sort here. But planning office said they would prefer underground detention of stormwater. So that would be a grassed area in the back there. That's back where those kilns used to be.
Excuse me, forgive me if I arrived late, but I'm interested to know if Saybrook Road is to the right of the brick buildings and the grass area in that lane.
This is Saybrook Road here, I'm sorry.
Saybrook Road is there.
Yeah, and this is Depot Road. To orient you, this is the town garage, and this is the elementary school. Can you see it all from where you are? And I have a picture of it as it is now, which may help also for you. You're a little far away, but existing site now, the brick building in the front, and again, the town garage and the elementary school. So Saybrook Road along the bottom here. And 81 right here, Citizens Bank.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, it's a big project. I've had some expressions of support in the town for which I'm very grateful. But I have some significant obstacles, among them the sewer and the water, to get by. I mean, it's different if there was city sewer and city water. It's a slam dunk. I just apply and hook up, and that's all there is to it. But I'm convinced that the obstacles are surmountable. I've spoken with enough engineers about on-site as an alternative to discharge in the river that I'm convinced that that can be done. Unfortunately, it shorts the village of what we had originally planned. I suppose one of the thoughts is that if the town garage ever moved, you could create a similar septic system for the village over on that property. Again, it's not my purview, but there's another way to do it. It's downhill from everything. It's a piece of land that would be owned by the town. If it's technically feasible for me to do it here, and the residential units are the users. The commercial units, although they present problems to you merchants, the usage is nothing compared with the residential. So, you know, if I used a half acre here, maybe there's a half acre there, and it would be enough for the village. I mean, you have to sort of define the village. I've always thought of it as that bowl.
But for commercial use also on your buildings, I'm not sure what you have planned for your commercial use, but it limits, it limits restaurant use.
Yeah, it's a problem. I mean, I could see, you know, in this whole complex, maybe a single restaurant or a single coffee shop of some sort. They'll design the system to accommodate it, and you need the grease separators now. I don't know if you guys know my history, but my wife and I are in the restaurant business and have been in the restaurant business since 1991. My wife is from Thailand, and we've operated a whole series of Thai restaurants. The first one in '91 up at the Kmart Plaza in Cromwell, and then we closed it and we moved it to the corner of College and Main Street in Middletown, Thai Gardens. That was ours. We operated that for 7 years, and then we opened one in West Hartford, and then one in Glastonbury. As we got older, our staying time kind of gave out. The last one was 4 years. But I'm embarrassed to say I'm in the middle of building another one in West Hartford to open up again. So I'm familiar with the restaurants and the grease machines that you have to have, and you couldn't accommodate a row of restaurants. But if there was a coffee shop and a restaurant, you could probably sewer it.
Could we put a Thai restaurant there?
I hope not. And you stay away from my wife. I don't want you anywhere near her. So that's my restaurant background, so I'm familiar with that. I mean, we're really hopeful about doing this. They're committed to do it. Anybody who's had any interest in the property has come up with a plan that we didn't like. You know, they don't have any sensitivity for Higganum. They don't have any sense for it. It's totally dollar motivated. And while we're not unmotivated by dollars and want to be able to build it and make a profit out of it, it's not the only thing. Both Rossi's, Ted and Peter, lived in town for many, many years. Peter still lives in town. Ted doesn't, he lives across the river now. And we occupied the brick office building, and then up the road, you know, the blue building next to the veterinarians, that was our offices for a number of years as well. We're now in Cromwell. So we feel differently about the town than somebody's just going to come in and look at it as a piece of meat and throw everything you could on it and get away with it. This project, I've talked to Liz about it, it would require a couple of waivers which are permitted under the zoning regulations, but could be approved from a parking, from a number of units standpoint. It's not that I would have to revise the regulations and change everything between what's permitted and what the commission is allowed to waive. This project could be built on the property, which was our objective. I mean, I could make these buildings 3 stories higher and come up with some huge number of units, and it would look stupid. It's Higganum Center. It just doesn't justify.
This would be a special permit though, wouldn't it?
Yes, I think it would. Yeah. Yeah. And I've met with planning and zoning, and I've showed them these plans, and I told them, you know, I've got to back off a little bit and do some homework, and then I'll hire an engineering firm.
Well, personally, Andy, I think it was very well thought out. It looks good to me.
Yeah. Andy, what's the elevation drop from Saybrook Road down to, say, where your green building is?
Back
there?
here?
Well,
Here?
There, yeah.
This, down, right in here, is probably 5 or 6. We need a surveyor. Is there a surveyor in the room?
Yeah, it's probably 5. You're begging me, huh? It's probably 5 or 6 feet.
Yeah, and then between there and the rear of the property, I would guess another 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's toughest at that north corner.
yeah, yeah.
So you're gonna have a 3-story building, but you're really only gonna be seeing
2.
basically 2.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The lower story, I mean, you would park in the rear, you'd enter, I mean, there would be parking in the front, you'd enter an elevator lobby in the back, and you'd have your ground floor, which would have light on 3 sides, the rear and the 2 ends. This side would be up against the bank. Your next floor would be at street grade, and your next floor would be, you know, at the same grade as that. And at one time, there was a suggestion that I make the 2nd story residential, but I just don't think that's a good place to live. I don't think anybody would want to live on the 2nd floor, looking at this going back and forth, and where would you put your bikes, and where would you put your barbecue grill, and if your kids went outside, would you have to tie a rope on them? So I just didn't think that that would be appropriate.
Andy, a question, a follow-up as far as elevations. Do you know that the state project for upgrading the box culverts underneath the intersection will not change elevation?
I don't know.
Okay, because I was under the understanding it would raise it.
Would raise it?
Yeah, a little bit anyway.
I wasn't aware of that.
Okay.
But the steeper slope is here. By the time I get over here, this is pretty much right at grade.
Oh, okay.
If you drive by the driveway into JC Products, and if you come out 81 and just look across, this is pretty much at grade. This is higher here.
Yeah.
Down here, I doubt there's a foot or 2 between the road and the property. So there's a lot of technical stuff to get done, and these are, you know, design elevations and a design plan, and I don't know what the final one would look like when I submit, but it'll look something like this. We've spent a lot of time on 31 different alternatives to come up with this, and we've gotten a good reaction from townspeople. We've showed it to us, and it seems as though it works from a size standpoint. I mean, you look at it, and the first thing you see is there's a lot of green, okay? There's a lot of white, and that's unfortunate, but you got to park somewhere. But if it's a 5-acre site, look at it quickly. I'll bet there's 2 acres of green on the site. Tough, you know, I mean, I could get somebody to calculate it, but it's not covered.
No, I think it looks great.
Thank you.
Did a nice job. I just hope you can get it through.
Yeah, I hope so too. Frankly, I'm more worried about the state with the technical requirements than I am with the town. I think the town would like to see something built there. It pretty much complies with the regulations as they're written. And if I could satisfy those 3 state requirements, water, wastewater disposal, and traffic, I would be able to, I think, go to the town and do something like this.
Now, when you had the lumber mill in there, you were using a lot of water at that point, weren't you?
No, there were 3 wells on the property, but we really didn't use any water except in the buildings. There was no process when we were there. We sawed a lot of lumber. We had a boiler, and the boiler, remember we produced steam heat from burning the chips and everything. The boiler used a certain amount of water, but there are 3 different wells on the property. Let me just bring this over now. And they've asked me, you know, what do I know about the wells? And the truth is I know where there are and nothing else. There's a well right at this corner of the brick building. There's a well right in front of the JC, actually 4 wells. There's a well here, there's a well by the pallet shop, and there's a well right in the front here. And I suspect, apart from the placement of the buildings, none of those wells would be kept in the new project. I think new well or wells would be drilled and used. I don't know the depth of those wells, I don't know the capacity of those wells. And there may be records in the town hall, but I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about the wells, just because I believe this close to the river in a sandy spot I could drill and I could get water. That's kind of my water thinking. So I have a project which I hope I can do. I'm pretty much committed to doing it. And I'm working now really on the technical pieces of it, making sure there's no contamination on the property, and dealing with people on the on the wastewater disposal, the sewer disposal. That's kind of where I am.
One last. Just curious. It looks almost square. What are the dimensions on that? Do you know?
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, with the exception of this and that sort of cutout there, it does look rectangular.
You can kind of scale it with the parking, each of those double parking,
20
six-
feet?
60
Okay.
feet, 60 feet from one space to the next space, to the, or no, this direction.
Oh, that direction?
That's 60 feet from one end.
Oh, here, 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 here.
Yeah, it's usually
so-
18, 22, 18,
Yeah.
in that vicinity.
I've got maps of it with
Yeah,
dimensions on it, but I
it's
just
like
simply don't know.
360
I know it is 5
by
acres.
450, something
All
like
right.
that.
And originally, we didn't own the JC Products site. And we thought about developing this, and Chucky Helen offered this for sale, we bought that site, and literally, it's a
Yeah.
parcel right aroround the building.
He only had about a foot outside the
Yeah,
building.
it isn't very far. But it completes the picture. If that wasn't owned, I don't know what it would be, so. That's our plan.
Did one more?
I have a question
Yes, ma'am, I'm
about
sorry.
brownfield grants. I'm wondering if you are aware of or planning to apply for brownfield grants. The EPA and the State Department of Economic and Community Development have brownfields funds available for assessment and remediation of contaminated sites.
I had
And,
heard that, and I do want to follow up on it, but I haven't done very much at this time.
I don't know who you met with at Fuss and O'Neill, but Dave Hurley is a vice president
big
at Fuss
brownfields
and O'Neill.
guy.
He's
Yeah.
intimately
He
familiar.
really knows all those programs.
He knows all the programs, and he's very aware of when the grants are available. They've been available for the past year. I've worked in Hartford to apply for some funding, and we recently obtained $3 million in brownfields awards to remediate an old factory.
Can I just have that?
Pardon?
Can you
It would
just
be
give that
nice,
to me?
wouldn't it? But there is money available now, and I think there will be over the course of the next year. So I would suggest you talk to David Hurley.
Yep, I wrote that down, and I would like to. In fact, I was at the site earlier today with a couple of Fuss and O'Neill guys, sort of talking about things. And they're the ones that taught me that expression.
Yeah.
Development is the best remediation or something.
Well, you know whose phrase that is? That's the commissioners.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, obviously, if there's something terrible down there, you can't leave it. But if we're talking about 150 years of industrial history, then that's what the answer is. Otherwise, what do? You take this site, demo everything on it, dig down 10 feet, take the soil away, and put it back. I mean, there's nobody in the world that could afford to do that.
We're actually doing it in Hartford.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah.
Ah.
3 acres. That
How many
was part-
acres?
Pardon me?
How many acres?
3 acres.
Wow.
That was part of a 6-acre site. So, and
That's an
we're
expensive
digging down,
project.
and Fuss actually did the planning for
Did
us.
they, yeah? John Hanley, I think, was the fellow I spoke with. Well, I don't know, but they're a good firm. I think they're a very good firm, and they're well respected, so. That's my plan. I'd be delighted to stay or answer any more questions.
Well, thanks, Andy, for showing up, appreciate it.
My pleasure, nice to have met you, Dan.
Hopefully,
To
everybody
see
get a
some
good
old
insight into
friends in
this
here.
and can talk it up or discuss it, and
Yeah?
Andy, before you
Keep moving
throw
forward.
everything away, can I just
Oh,
get,
I'm sorry.
this is just
For history.
for